telling you this is what's going to happen because I've talked to them face to face, and they don't even hide the fact.
How powerful are they? Well, they are so powerful that they have taken over control of the United States. Neither the president nor the Congress is in control of the United States. They pick the presidents. If they don't like them, they get rid of them.
That person will wear the throne of the world. Behind that person will be a council of what they call wise men who will really be the rulers. This poor guy is just going to be the fool they stick out there to take the brunt of the public wrath whenever it's necessary. Then you can knock him off if you want to. They just put somebody else up there.
It's taken me 25 years to come to the conclusions that I have come to. And I want to tell you that one of the biggest things I discovered in my work was the existence of a supranational committee composed of 300 men called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
300 people you've never heard of. They don't hold office, they don't give speeches, they don't campaign, they don't need your vote. And he's not talking about the secret societies you've heard 100 times. This is what the headlines never touch.
This is the committee that runs the world. Now, in my book, The Committee of 300, I name every one of them. This is not a book that talks about they. It gives you specifics.
Now, this is one of those videos that rarely stays visible for long. But what you're about to watch will explain a lot of the strange things happening in the world right now. So, let's get right into it.
Who and what is the Committee of 300? Well, I've dealt with that. I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German socialist by the name of Walter Rathenau. Now, I'll give you some background of Walter Rathenau. He was the financial advisor to the Kaiser of Germany, and he was also the financial advisor to the Rothschilds, the French family Rothschild. So he must have known what he's talking about. He made an astonishing statement in 1934. He said, there is a committee of 300 men that rule the world. They are known only to each other, and nothing happens without their consent.
This isn't about symbols, or handshakes, or a club everyone already suspects. This is the top of the chain. At least that's his claim. The structure nobody sees. And as this man will explain, every organization has its place. They all fit into a hierarchy. But at the very top, 300 people. Pay attention to this part.
I came across this quite by accident when I was serving in Africa, in Angola, and I was given a series of documents which were only supposed to be handed in to top-level people. They were what we called above the top level of classification of intelligence documents, and there I discovered that whilst I thought I was in Africa fighting against the invasion of the communists, I was in fact fighting to introduce socialist regimes in the black African countries, and that I was actually working for a committee called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
This isn't someone guessing from the sidelines. He's describing a moment where the story didn't match the mission. He thought he was fighting one enemy. Then he claims he realized he was building something else entirely. And that raised a different kind of question. Not who's in charge, but how high the chain really goes. His name is Dr. John Coleman, and he frames this as a 25-year-old investigation shaped by intelligence-level access. Let's keep going.
In 1986, I wrote a work called Mind Control, Metaphysics, Extremely Low Frequency Radiation and Weather Modifications. And in that work, July the 8th, 1986, I said that the top-level intelligence organization in the United States was the National Reconnaissance Office, far bigger than the CIA and any of the other intelligence agencies. And by the way, we have about 10 different ones in the United States. I even had the audacity to give the address of this organization. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Sam Donaldson, the gentleman who wears that beautiful toupee so effectively, he came on with the program in prime time, and he said, this is one of the biggest scoops that ABC has ever had. and he told about the National Reconnaissance Organization. The exact same thing that I published 8 years earlier. I tell you this to set the stage so that you'll understand I do have some experience and that I know that of which I speak.
So here's what he's doing. He's not just making a claim. He's planting a marker in time, 1986. And he says he named the organization before the public was even supposed to know it existed. Because once you understand that layer exists, you stop thinking intelligence is just spies in meetings. It's reach, it's visibility, it's who gets to see the world first and who reacts second. And if a system like that sits above the usual agencies, then you have to ask a darker question. What sits above that? Watch this.
And I came across the families in Italy who were called the Fondi, meaning the people who had all the money. They were all members of the Committee of 300, the Lucatis, the Recanatis, the Volpi du Miseratis. These people are so wealthy that they would make David Rockefeller look like a piker. That is how rich they are. And this is the committee that runs the world. Now, in my book, The Committee of 300, I name every one of them. This is not a book that talks about they. It gives you specifics.
This is where his story shifts. From theory to names. Not they, not someone. He's saying, I can point to families. And whether you believe his list or not, the idea underneath it is real. Power doesn't reset every 4 years. It accumulates. It inherits. It survives scandals, elections, and headlines. Because the kind of influence that lasts isn't built on popularity. It's built on ownership, on access, on networks that don't need to introduce themselves. But even wealth isn't the whole machine. Wealth needs a way to move the world without showing its hand. And this is where it gets uncomfortable.
When former head of state Mikhail Gorbachev visited the United States a few years ago, flanked by George Bush and Quayle, he opened his Gorbachev Foundation in the United States. And he let slip, he said, this is being done with approval of the Committee of 300. CNN cameras were on him. They immediately switched. Now, I wrote to CNN and I said, could I have a transcript of this program, which they said was available. I never got a reply. I followed it up with letter after letter, but nothing ever came of it. The point I'm trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that the federal government, the secret upper-level parallel government that runs the United States, does not want you to know that you have an upper-level parallel government that calls the shots, that dictates what is going to happen to your life and mine.
That line changes everything. Because now he's not describing a theory, he's describing a system that protects itself. Maybe there's an innocent explanation. Maybe not. But the point is this. If influence can decide what gets recorded, then it can also decide what gets remembered. And once power becomes something you can't even trace, the next question isn't who, it's where. Where does a structure like that live? Because it wouldn't operate as a rumor. It would operate through institutions. Pay attention to this part.
I revealed the existence of an organization called the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is located at Chatham House in 10 St. James Square in London. I also revealed the existence of the Club of Rome, the Cini Foundation, the Mont Pelerin Society, the Order of St. John, which was known but not known. And I listed all of these secret societies that run the world as executive arms of the Committee of 300. So it controls the world through all of these. The Royal Institute for International Affairs is the executive arm of this committee, which gives instructions to the United States government to this very day. The chain of command is as follows. Every Secretary of State that has been appointed since 1919 is appointed by the Royal Institute for International Affairs. That may come as a shock for you. You think you vote and you put a conservative in the White House, and then he appoints supposedly or allegedly conservative people to carry out the policies that you wanted him to implement. Surprise, surprise. I ask you to find me a conservative Secretary of State since 1919. And if you search diligently and apply the correct rules, you will come up blank. Every one of the Secretaries of State was chosen in London by the Secretary of State, as was Wilson, the President Wilson, as was Roosevelt, as was James Earl Carter. He was specially chosen because he'd had 3 mental breakdowns, and they felt he would be a good guy to manipulate. Oh, I'm talking facts.
Different presidents, different parties, the same advisory structure. Because when policy is filtered before it even reaches an election, votes don't change direction, they change packaging. But institutional influence alone doesn't move societies. To shape real outcomes, it needs something stronger. Leverage, economic pressure, dependence that turns choices into necessities. And that's where the next phase begins.
This Committee of 300 told a man called Aurelio Pecci to form this Club of Rome with the main object of bringing down the industries and the agricultural development of the United States. He immediately wrote a paper in which he said there are too many people on the earth, and that the United States, with its industrial development, its agricultural development, is responsible for this curse of overpopulation. So the Club of Rome was instituted and organized to start an attack on the world's population using the United States as the whipping boy. And they came up with a paper called the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America.
This is where his claims shift from politics to pressure. He connects the Committee of the Club of Rome. He connects the Club of Rome to zero growth. And then he connects zero growth to one outcome: tightening the system. Now, you don't have to accept the motive he assigns to it, but the mechanism is real. When systems tighten, the impact doesn't hit evenly. The wealthy buffer it, the poor adapt to it, and the middle absorbs it. Mortgages, wages, savings, stability. That's the layer that carries the strain. Now listen closely to what he claims next.
The middle class in the United States of America had to be destroyed because in the coming push to a world order, the middle class would be the stumbling block, because history had shown that the peasant class in ancient days, when they had revolted, were just easily crushed. There was no resistance. But now had grown a new super class of people in the United States called the middle class, who had long-term employment, who had job security, who were well paid, who could afford to buy the products that were made by the United States and didn't need to buy products from China or anywhere else. And the Club of Rome post-industrial zero-growth paper said this has got to stop. We have to bring down the middle class of the United States. And the way that we will do this, the way that we will accomplish this task, is by crushing their industries.
Whether you call it policy, markets, or global pressure, the weight never lands evenly. It lands where society is most stable, the middle. Because the middle has something to lose: a job, a mortgage, a routine, a future. And when that layer weakens, dependence grows quietly. Not overnight, but structurally. While ordinary people feel instability as pain, those above it experience the same events as logistics. They hedge, they move assets, they buy buffers. And that's the real divide. Not what happens, but who it happens to. Here's how Coleman explains it.
The Club of Rome celebrated its cell-diversity anniversary, and Alexander King, its chairman, stated, the American people henceforth must get used to the idea that they will never ever again in their lifetime have full employment. What a scandalous thing that our government is fully cooperating with this organization built up by the Royal Institute for International Affairs to destroy the middle class of the United States.
The Order is truly a secret society. It was founded in the United States at Yale University in 1833. It has continued and exists down to the present day. Each year, the Order takes in 15 men, senior students from Yale University. Never more than 15, only once has it been less than 15. In 1946, they took in, I think, 10 rather than 15 members. So what we have is a secret society which, over the last 150 years, has accumulated about 2,500 members, of whom perhaps 500 are alive today. Of this 500, perhaps 100 are actively in pursuit of the objectives of the Order.
15 recruits, every year since 1833. And if this is real, it would explain why the world feels like it's accelerating. Like decisions are being made faster than people can react. Like we're being pulled towards something, and nobody voted for it. And maybe what we're seeing right now isn't the beginning of the story. Maybe it's the part where the system finally starts showing itself. Watch this.
It's not another college fraternal society. Yale University is the only university in the United States, or indeed the world, which has senior societies. These are societies where the 15 are selected in the junior year and actually are initiated at the beginning of the senior year. They stay on campus only 1 year as members. They are called knights. When they graduate, they leave the university, they go out into the world, then they're known as patriarchs. So at any one time, you only have 15 knights in existence, and for the rest of their lives, they're known as patriarchs. And they work during their lifetime, or a number do, towards the ends of the Order. They are pretty much guaranteed success. Certainly they're guaranteed financial success. And in my reading of the material I have, I infer that so long as they go along with the purposes of the Order, so long as they gear their careers and their lives towards certain ends, then they are guaranteed success.
And here's the unsettling part. If history really is being guided by pipelines like this, then what we're watching right now might not be random at all. It might be the last phase of something that's been running quietly for a long time. And the reason it's hard to see is because it doesn't feel like a takeover. It feels normal until you zoom out. This is Anthony Sutton, an economist and researcher who spent years digging into power networks. He was one of the few who got that far. But once he started exposing their entire system on live TV, it made powerful people pay attention. And let's just say they didn't exactly let it spread too far. Watch this.
Well, up to 6 months ago, I denied that there was a conspiracy, because frankly I couldn't prove one. I suspected a conspiracy, but I couldn't prove there was one until 6 months ago. Well, a little before 6 months ago, I received the catalog, which is the membership list of the society, all the way back to 1833. And I received some of their internal documents, enough for me to put together the way they correspond with each other, the operations within the Order, to some extent their problems.
If that's true, then we're not dealing with conspiracy talk. We're dealing with documentation. But even if you stay skeptical, and you should, what he describes next is something you can actually look up. A building on Yale's campus, with no windows, and a number that keeps showing up in the strangest places. 322.
The Order has a temple on the Yale campus.
A temple?
A temple, yes. It's a building maybe this 50, 60 feet by 40 feet, maybe 40 feet high. There's no windows, two big steel doors.
Okay, so pause. Because when most people hear secret society, they picture something vague, a rumor, a name, a symbol on the internet. But a temple is different. And what he's describing isn't subtle either. It's not a hidden room somewhere. It's a building on campus, with no windows and steel doors. Look, we can debate the bigger story later, but this building is real. Watch this.
We know what the temple looks like because back in 1880s, a number of Yale students became a little unhappy about what was going on inside this temple. When they went by it at midnight, sometimes they heard strange noises and all kinds of rumors on the Yale campus as to what this might be. There was a break-in. I call it the Yale Gate. There was a break-in to the temple, and the students who broke in cataloged what they found.
This is where it gets weird, because you know how these stories usually go, right? It's always people say, or some believe, but he's claiming something more specific. He's saying there was a moment, way back, where the secrecy cracked. Students broke in, and according to him, they left with documentation. And what they found inside had numbers on the walls.
And they made a drawing, a design of the interior of the temple. And 3 of the rooms are numbered. One is 322, one is 323, and one is 324. 322 is also, I suspect, the chapter number.
And then he drops a number, 322. And this is where the story shifts again, because numbers don't work like symbols do. A symbol can be interpreted 100 ways, but a number usually points to something specific. And what he says next is the part that really stuck with me, because it implies that 322 isn't just written on a wall, it's used as a signature, as if it's a quiet way of saying, I'm one of you.
322 is an identification. And also in correspondence between members, they conclude their correspondence where you and I would conclude yours truly or yours sincerely. They conclude yours in 322.
And this is where the name most people recognize finally enters the story, because the order isn't how the internet knows it. It's known by something much simpler, something that sounds almost childish, until you realize how long it's been attached to real power. Skull and bones. And the number that keeps following it, 322. Now this is the part people usually skip past, because it gets uncomfortable. But it's also the part that explains everything. Watch this.
This is a symbol of death. Now why would they take a symbol of death?
Yes, from what I understand, when a new member is initiated, that would be in the senior year at Yale, he's placed within a coffin.
Oh my.
And from the photographs we have of members inside the temple, many of these photographs are the 15s sitting around a table, and they have this skull and the crossbones sitting on the table in front of them. It is the symbol of death, and it has been called the Brotherhood of Death, and I think it probably more adequately should be called the Brotherhood of Death.
Okay, this is where my brain stopped treating this like a rumor, because up until now, everything could still be explained away. But this is the first detail that feels deliberate, like it's designed to do something to you. And when you see rituals like this show up inside a closed network, you start asking a different question. Not, is it real, but what is it for?
Look at the history, the biographies of the leading members of the order, and reconstruct their career, and see if there's a common pattern in their careers. But to come back to my point, I have to reconstruct the objectives. What are the objectives? In the words of one member, might is right. If you have the power, you use it to achieve your objectives. What is the objective? As you look at the histories of individual members, it can only be one thing: to acquire power, to keep power, to use power for their own purposes.
There it is. That's the engine underneath all the imagery. Power. Acquire it, keep it, use it. And this is where the story starts tightening up, because now the ritual makes sense. The temple makes sense. The code makes sense. It's not there to look spooky. It's there to create a machine, a pipeline, a loyalty structure, a network that moves people upward and keeps them aligned.
For example, Averell Harriman is a very influential member of the order. Harriman was initiated in 1913. His club number is D111. All the other 14 of D111 have died off. Averell Harriman is the only one left. To come to the other part of your question, who are some of the significant members? Today, 2 men stand out. One is Averell Harriman, who is I suppose, the chief financial angel of the Democratic Party. The other is Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush. The Bush family is quite prominent within the order. Now, if you go back in history a little, you'll find that George Bush's father, Prescott Sheldon Bush, was also a member of the order. He was a member of Brown Brothers Harriman, which is the Harriman private banking company. So today you've got two men who are supposedly in politics in opposition, Bush and Harriman, actually the members of the same secret society. And Bush's father was not only a member, he was a partner in what was then Harriman and Company, which later became Brown Brothers Harriman. So behind the scenes, and this is something you don't see until you investigate it, people who appear to be in opposition politically or financially or industrially or in many ways are working together.
That's the moment where the story shifts. Because now it isn't just symbolism. It's a claim about alignment. About people who appear to be on opposite sides, moving through the same pipeline. And if that sounds impossible, he explains the method in one sentence.
The method they use is that of the Hegelian dialectic. Thesis played against antithesis leads to a synthesis. In other words, for Hegel, for history to make progress, you have to have conflict. And when you look at the key people in the order, you will find that they generate conflict. So Bush and Harriman politically are conflicting. Coffin and Buckley, although part of the same order, are in public conflicting with one another because conflict leads to the new synthesis.
In simple terms, it's conflict by design. One side against the other. And while everyone is trapped inside the fight, the outcome gets shaped somewhere else. If you've ever felt like the winning side changes, but the direction doesn't, this explains why. Now the question becomes, what's the point? Because if the conflict is engineered, then the outcome isn't random. And Sutton says the objective isn't just influence, it's bigger than money. He says it's a direction for the entire system.
We're under the control of what I call a cabal, and this is part of a grander scheme.
This is Paul Hellyer, the former Defense Minister of Canada, a man with access to classified intelligence and the inner workings of power. Now, he speaks candidly about what he witnessed behind closed doors and what's about to come.
And that's the end game. That's what they're moving toward. They've been working on it for 50 years, and it's well advanced. If something isn't done, they're going to get away with it.
He says there's a larger plan in motion, and we're moving faster toward it than most people realize.
How powerful are they? Well, they are so powerful that they have taken over control of the United States. There's so much that's been kept in the dark that it's going to take a lot of unwinding to get at the truth. But truth, we must see.
What you're about to hear might make you want to share this video, because he doesn't just describe the entire system. He warns about what's coming next, and whether we realize it or not, that moment may be approaching faster than we expect.
Happily, some of us are beginning to talk about that sort of thing, and people are saying, "You're kidding me," and I said, "No, I'm not kidding you. But if it happens, just say, wave at them, and say, we know you're playing games with us, and we're not going to go along with it. We're going to stand up for our rights."
Standing up for your rights can mean a lot of things, but in today's world, one of the rights most people have already lost is privacy. Because your personal information doesn't just stay with the websites you give it to. It gets collected, packaged, and sold by data brokers, appearing on people's search sites and databases most people don't even know exist. That's why I use today's sponsor, Incogni. Incogni automatically scans for places where your personal information is exposed and sends legal removal requests to hundreds of data broker sites, and keeps repeating those requests so your data stays removed. And if you find a site that still has your information online, you can use Incogni's custom removal feature. Just send them the link and their team handles the rest. If you'd like to check it out, go to incogni.com/advice and use the code ADVICE to get 60% off annual plans. Now, back to the video.
I'm going to start with the money mafia, because it is the most urgent issue in the world today. The problem with the money situation is that there's only about one person in every 100 who really understands it. And there's some, we think of money in some esoteric way of wishing, of course, we'd had more. But it's a little complex.
Remember when someone else said the same thing? That the system is too complex to understand? Take a look.
But what I found was most people, be it in business, in normal life, or in the world leaders, don't really understand money. It is something they think about. They have a sense of what it is. They certainly want more of it. But they also make statements like, we want more money, but we don't want more debt, which just shows a misunderstanding of what money at its core really is. So most people don't, they want to make it, they want to save it, but to understand it intimately is not a normal character.
Money first, then everything else falls into place. Stay with me, because this part is key to understanding the bigger picture.
It's just as a result of a system which has grown up, which is designed to take us to the cleaners. And something can be done about it, something must be done about it.
Now the explanation begins. And trust me, every piece matters. They all connect. So listen carefully.
So let's try to learn. What is money? Well, most people don't know. It used to be coins, silver, gold, copper, and some iron coins. But of course, we got too busy and too big to be able to do that. If you're going to buy a house, you can't put a bag and pay for it. And so we started using paper money. And at first it was backed by some coins or things, and later, of course, it wasn't. But over the years, the system has changed to the point where today, only about 3% of all money is either coins or paper. 97% is virtual, and virtual means computer entry.
Money is just data now, which leads to the most important question of all. Who controls the data?
The first and probably the brightest of the governors of the Bank of Canada said that money was just a book entry. If he were alive today, he'd say money is just a computer entry. Well, the problem is, whose computers? And that's where we have to do something about it.
But whose computers? You've heard it a million times. Follow the money. And coming from a former defense minister, it's worth at least hearing him out.
We, the people, own the patent to create money. We have licensed private individuals to do it for us, and they now create 97% of all the money, but they create all of it as debt, and debt on which interest has to be paid, and no one creates any money with which to pay the interest, so you just keep going further and further and further into debt. The whole system is mathematically absurd. It's more insane than insane, if that's possible.
Before we go further, let's take a step back. This didn't appear overnight. It started somewhere. And to understand where we are, we have to understand where it all began.
I want to just give you a bit of a background on the history of the system is multiplied and what we call bank leverage. If we go back 300 years when the Bank of England was chartered, they lent half of their money, or all of their capital, their gold and silver, to the king at 8%. So he gave them a license to print, P-R-I-N-T, an equal amount, and lend it to their rich friends at high interest rates. So in effect, they were allowed to lend the same capital twice.
Now, we've all heard about printing money, inflation, the Federal Reserve. It's not exactly news. And sure, it doesn't sound great. But wait until you hear how he connects the dots. Because those connections, let's just say they're eye-opening.
But to understand, most people have the myth, observe the myth, that if you go to the bank to borrow money to buy a car, that what they're lending you is somebody deposit that somebody else made the day before or a couple of days before. Not so. They create the money. They're pretty well lent out all the time. So if you go in and say to buy a car for $35,000, and what they'll do is ask you for collateral, and if you have some stocks or bonds, okay, or failing that, you can give them a second mortgage on your house or your cottage, and if you can't do any of those things, you can get co-signature of a rich relative. And once they're satisfied with the collateral, then they'll have you sign a note for $35,000, repayable principal and interest at prime plus, 2 or 3%, depending on the color of your eyes. As soon as they're satisfied, they tap their computer and $35,000 appears in your account that you can go out and spend. Seconds earlier, that money did not exist. It was created out of thin air.
So that money didn't exist until the moment you borrowed it. But here's the funny thing. You still pay taxes when you buy something, then taxes when you own it, then taxes when you sell it. Taxes on top of taxes. It's almost like we're renters on our own planet, and the landlord always collects. Makes you think about the system we've all just accepted, doesn't it?
And as a result of that borrowing, we have paid $1,100 billion in interest since 1974, none of it which was necessary, none.
He just gave you the number for Canada. The US is sitting on $34 trillion in debt. Most of the world is in the red. But have you ever asked yourself, who's on the other side of that debt? Who are we paying? If you don't have a clear answer, you're not alone. So stay with me, because now he starts connecting everything.
Because it is all part of something bigger that's going on in the world, and that is to take away power from the people and give it to multinational corporations and banks who are under the control of what I call the cabal. And this is part of a grander scheme.
Maybe he's just an angry former politician with conspiracy theories. Or maybe he has insights that we don't. Either way, this is what he's saying.
Now this is being engineered, as I said, by an international cabal. Now what is a cabal? Is a group of people with the banking cartel at the apex, then the oil cartel, and then the international corporations, the transnational corporations, and then the U.S. Intelligence organizations, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and a huge chunk of the American military. And they're all in it together.
He makes a lot of claims here. And look, I don't know if it's true. I don't have that kind of access. But it does raise a question. Why would all these groups be in it together? What's the goal? That's where things get really interesting, and where his claims become harder to dismiss.
As President Clinton said in response to a question by White House reporter Sarah McClendon, he replied, and I quote, "Sarah, there is a government inside the government, and I don't control it." Can you imagine?
Maybe from time to time we all get little clues like this one, and they say a lot, don't they? When a president says something of that caliber, even offhand, you have to ask, if he's not really in charge, then who is?
They control the free energy that we need. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that or not, but the same cabal owns the patents to free energy. And there are several different ways of going about that, but the most likely is what they call zero-point energy, is the energy that's everywhere in the cosmos. It's unlimited. It could have been there long ago if it hadn't been for the fact that these people who are in control don't want to see any change.
He makes a strong claim about free energy, that we could have had it long ago. Whether you believe it or not, what comes next connects to something that affects every one of us. See what you think.
Well, the cabal is also responsible for the war on... The cabal is also, AKA, military-industrial complex. Carol Rosin, Dr. Carol Rosin, a friend of mine, worked with Dr. Werner von Braun, who was one of the scientists who came to work in the United States at the end of the war, and who mellowed as he got older, and said the industrial military complex has to have an enemy to justify all of this money they're spending on. So they have to have an enemy, and if they don't have one, they have to manufacture one.
That's a lot to take in, and I don't know what to make of it. But here's where he shifts from theory to something more immediate. A warning about what's still to come, and why we should pay attention.
After they get through with the, if they ever do, is to stage a mock attack in order to get the people of the United States to accept martial law as the onset of the new.
Guys, what's interesting is that recently, and I mean really recently, Obama was on a podcast and started saying things like this. Listen to this.
Are aliens real?
They're real
but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
And then, almost immediately, Trump reacted, almost reinforcing what Obama affirmed. Here's what he said.
Something that got a lot of attention this week. Barack Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. You know?
So aliens are real?
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that.
Well,
he made a big mistake. He took it out of classified information.
Strange times. But Paul is not over yet, because he still has something to say to us.
Happily, some of us are beginning to talk about that sort of thing, and people are saying, "You're kidding me," and I said, "No, I'm not kidding you. But if it happens, just say, wave at them, and say, we know you're playing games with us, and we're not going to go along with it. We're going to stand up for our rights."
Maybe none of this is real. Maybe he went down the rabbit hole years ago and never came back. Or maybe he's right. But how could we ever prove it? He makes so many claims and most of them are impossible to verify. So where does that leave us? Confused, skeptical, unsure what to believe. But then, there comes the part that resonated with me. The part I actually believe is true. Listen.
There was a time when Americans feared God, we did too, but in the post-war period, we have worshipped money. Money, power, and greed. And those have been the operative words. And so we think of nothing else. How can you make another buck? We have to change. And there's some wonderful things that are going on. There's some wonderful people in the world who are doing wonderful things. And more power to them. But what they need is the same thing 1,000 times over. We have to have a tsunami, as I call it, of changed lives, of people who are willing to put their lives on the line for what they believe and to change the world.
What role in the Middle East again does Israel play in this?
Israel was created as the instrument to bring about the Battle of Armageddon and the fulfillment of prophecy, a war that will be so terrible, where nuclear weapons will be used, so that the American citizens and the other people in the world will get down on their knees and beg for no more war. And what is the answer to that? They're going to be told the only way we can guarantee no more war is if we destroy the sovereignty of nations and we come together as one humanity and government.
Right.
Now I'm telling you, unless the American people wake up and stop it, starting in about 1996, the Battle of Armageddon will become a reality.
He laid out the blueprint for everything we're seeing today. He knew why it had to happen, he knew who was behind the curtain, and he knew what we should expect next.
Read the book of Revelations, whether you believe in the book or not, read it, because the men who are bringing this about are using it as their script.
This interview was recorded in 1992, and as you listen, you'll understand why his blueprint still matters today. Because he said it would all unfold exactly like this, down to the smallest detail of the script.
And I get people who still come to me all the time and say, "Bill, you're all wrong, it's the Jews. The Jews are subverting the world." Man, it's not the Jews, it's not the Catholics, it's not the blacks. It's these men who belong to the ancient mystery schools, who meet in secret and decide the fate of the world. And they belong to all different races and all different nationalities and all different religions to the public point of view. But in secret, it's a different story.
He claimed the fate of billions rest in the hands of a small group of people. And their strategy, he said, is simple. Keep us watching the circus so we never look behind the curtain.
At the highest levels of all countries, they all belong to the same club. And we, the people, sit back and we watch this grand drama, which is being played out for our benefit, not theirs. If it wasn't for us, they wouldn't even have to do any of this. But you see, they just can't come out and destroy all of us because they need slaves. They need people to make their shoes and make their cars and mine the ore. They need worker bees, and that's what we are.
His name is Bill Cooper, and what you're about to hear is his warning to the world. He believed that if you don't spare the time to hear this message to the end, if you don't make the effort to understand it and finally wake up, then you're participating in the great deception just as much as they are. His words, not mine.
George Orwell was just like me. He was a low-level member of British intelligence who was appointed to a position high enough where he saw the same documents that I saw. And he tried to warn the world just like I'm trying to warn the world, only he wasn't willing to take the risk that I'm willing to take, so he wrote it in a book called 1984 and spelled out exactly what's coming as a warning to the people of the world, as a work of fiction. But you notice that that work of fiction really stirred people up because they knew that it wasn't fiction. In their heart of hearts, everyone who's read that book knows that it's coming.
Here's what Orwell understood. Control doesn't happen overnight. First you distract, then you divide, then you rewrite the rules so people don't even know they're being controlled. 1984 showed us the final destination. A world where nothing is true and everything is permitted except for those in power. For decades, that was just fiction. But now, more and more of the pieces are fitting together. The scenarios that were once ridiculed are beginning to look like the morning news.
Why is it that you are here today, or how is it that you are here today and you're not, conveniently taken away and put in a padded cell somewhere so that you can't speak of these things?
I can tell you this, I began to reveal information in 1976, and I was physically attacked on 2 occasions. My skull was caved in, that's what all these scars are here. On the second attack, I lost my leg, they visited me in the hospital. They had no intention of killing me, they were delivering a message to me. Shut up. And that was the message that came through loud and clear. And 2 men who identified themselves with identification cards who belonged to the Defense Investigative Service, which is really the Defense Intelligence Agency, asked me if I was going to shut up or they were going to have to do it right. And I told them, I said, you don't have to worry about me. I'm going to be a good little boy for the rest of my life, and I'm going to shut my mouth. And I did for 16 years. Kept silent until I saw this.
You can talk conspiracies all day and people will just ridicule you, call you paranoid. But when you start talking about what you're not supposed to, that's when they come after you. At least that's what Bill said in the full interview. But now, he's starting to say things that really make you pause. Look at the pattern. Why does every piece connect? If it's all just coincidence, why does it keep happening? Listen to this.
Either these men are following the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is in the Bible. They're either following it, just like a plan, and bringing the prophecies in there to pass to manipulate and control those who believe in those prophecies and neutralize them, so to speak. In other words, if this is written in the Bible and God has ordained it, who am I to resist? It must come to pass, so I'm not going to try to stop it.
Okay.
What a perfect way to neutralize the opposition right off the bat. Or there really is a God, and what he said was going to come to pass is coming to pass. And I named this, Behold a Pale Horse, from chapter 13 of the book of Revelations. The 4th horse, the 4th horseman of the apocalypse is the pale horse. And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death. And hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with the beasts of the earth.
Now, look at the 4 horsemen. Revelation 6 describes white, red, black, and pale. The Greek word for pale is chloros, greenish, the color of death. Some point to the red horse, war, as already writing. The black horse comes next. Famine, collapse. The verse describes inflated prices, scarcity. Some suggest it could be approaching. Revelation 13 describes a world where no one can buy or sell without a mark. Today, central bank digital currencies are rolling out globally. Is it the mark? No one can say. But the technology described? It's being built. Whether you believe it or not, some in power clearly do. Commanders quote Revelation, leaders invoke Scripture. Bill Cooper said they're following a script. Look at the pattern. Something is lining up.
Everything that's in my book, Behold a Pale Horse, is all, everything in here, all the documents that are in here, everything that's in this book is in the public domain.
Can be substantiated?
Yes, and I intentionally wrote this book, not using anything that wasn't available to the public, to show people that yes, if I can find this information, so can you. I have tons of stuff that's not available to the public. But as you can see by reading this book, you don't need that stuff because it's what you need is available to you. Public libraries are overflowing with the proof of what's really going on in the world, but nobody really utilizes it to the extent that they're able to pick this out and put it together. Another thing I've done for people is I've put it together for them so that they can see the overall picture rather than looking at small things and thinking that it's isolated. Nothing is isolated. It's all part of a big puzzle.
Why is it that we can hear something this important and still forget it by tomorrow? Maybe we don't want to believe. Maybe we're scared. But I think it's something else. We're numb. Life grinds us down. Work, stress, the endless scroll, it all adds up. And then we turn on the news, hoping to understand. But instead we get noise, distortion, confusion. And that numbness, it becomes a habit, a survival mechanism. But what if that's exactly what some are counting on?
All the media in this country, radio, television, and print, is all owned by 5 corporations. All of these corporations that own the media are owned and controlled, and members of the Council on Foreign Relations sit on their board of directors. But you can trace that yourself.
Okay.
Remember, if you go down and you trace the ownership of a station or a newspaper, and you get to a corporation, remember that somebody owns that corporation, and it's usually another corporation. But when you trace the interlocking of all these things, when you get to the top, there's 5. And all journalists know that there's some things you don't write about, and you don't talk about, because you'll lose your job. And that's where the control is.
Let's try it, shall we? Pick a news network, any network. Let's start with CNN. On your phone, type, "Who owns CNN?" You'll see it's owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. Good. Now type, "Who owns Warner Brothers Discovery?" In 2026, that's changing. Warner Brothers Discovery just signed a deal to be acquired by Paramount for over $110 billion. Now type, "Who owns Paramount?" Paramount was bought last year by Skydance Media, and Skydance Media is led by David Ellison. Now type, "Who is David Ellison?" He's the son of Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, one of the richest men in the world. But keep going. Who runs CBS News? CBS is owned by Paramount, and the editor-in-chief of CBS News? Bari Weiss. She was appointed after the Skydance acquisition. Now here's the thing. Cooper said all media is owned by 5 corporations. That was decades ago. Today, the names change, but the pattern doesn't. You start with a news network, you end with a billionaire. And that billionaire, always connected to power. Try it yourself. Pick any network, any platform. Follow the chain, see where it ends. You might be surprised how fast you get to the same place. Let's continue, because this next part is about us.
That's why they pay athletes these fantastic salaries. I was listening to the radio the other day. They just contracted to pay one player on one team $6 million a year. Can you believe this?
And why is that?
It's the Roman circus. What does the emperor do when the people become restive? And when the people are asking questions, and when the people don't like the policies of the emperor, he sends them to the circus. He creates a circus. He builds a giant coliseum. And he begins to throw the Christians to the lions. And he has great chariot races and football games and basketball games, all to keep the idiots preoccupied with things that don't mean anything in the scheme of the entire world, so that they don't have the time to learn what the truth is, so they don't ever get smart enough to learn how they're being manipulated, so they don't ever question the emperor. That's why they pay a player on a football team or a baseball team $1 million or $2 million or $3 million a year. It is the Roman circus. I know men who don't know anything in the world except who plays third base for the Mets. And they think that's a great accomplishment. And they meet and pat each other on the back and bond and go have cocktails and talk about what this guy that plays third base for the Mets did in last night's game. It's sad. It's really sad.
Juvenal, the Roman poet, said it almost 2,000 years ago. The people who once handed out military commands, high offices, everything, now restrains itself and anxiously hopes for just two things: bread and circuses. Bread and circuses. Today, the bread is your paycheck. The circus is the game. And while we're glued to the screen cheering for millionaires we've never met, the real decisions are being made somewhere else, by people we'll never see. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. History shows that a society obsessed with entertainment often becomes easier to control. As long as we're watching, we're not asking. As long as we're cheering, we're not challenging. And as long as we're numb, they stay in power.
But let me tell you something. When 150 of the most powerful men and women in the world can meet in secret in Baden-Baden, Germany, and plot the fate of billions, and nobody even cares about it. But 6 football players go to lunch together, and it's in the headlines across the country. You have a reflection of the society in which that exists. And it is a sick society that is doomed to self-destruction.
So based on that scenario, there's some truth into what these men are looking at.
Absolutely, and that's what makes me so sick, is that I'm trying to wake up a people who on a daily basis are proving the ones that I'm warning them about to be right.
Be honest. When was the last Davos meeting? And what exactly was proposed there? Most of us couldn't answer that, because we don't care. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have Netflix, we have our own lives, bills, work, relationships. Who has time to track what 150 powerful people discussed in a Swiss mountain town? And even if we watch a video about it, we forget it in seconds. The next scroll, the next notification, the next distraction. That's exactly what Cooper was talking about. While we're busy living our lives, decisions that affect our future are being made elsewhere. And most of us are simply too distracted to notice.
The right track is don't believe anybody. Don't believe me. Don't believe George Bush. Don't believe anyone. You got to go out and you got to get proof in your hand before you can believe anything. And to do otherwise today is the biggest mistake that anyone can ever make. You begin believing people, putting your trust in them, that they're telling you the truth. I guarantee you're going to take a ride on a roller coaster you don't want to be on.
Do your own research. Don't jump in the comments and ask, so what do we do now? I'm telling you, use your mind. Because even these videos, they're not here to feed you conspiracy theories. They're here to engage you, to wake something up. Critical thinking is the point. It's better to put your mind to work than to wait for information to be handed to you. Because what if all the information out there is wrong? What then? We have to go back to the roots, back to what we know is good, what we know is wrong. That inner compass, it's still there. We just stopped using it.
Now, do these people recognize the continuity of life? In other words, you have told me earlier that they're after physical immortality.
They believe that through their technology, man will become God. With the power of reason, through technology, man will himself become God. They will engineer, just like he wanted to do, the super race who will live forever. And the concept is the same, and the men behind it are the same as was.
Bill said more than 30 years ago that they would reach for immortality through technology. Back then, it probably sounded absurd. But now, look at what's happening. Neuralink has successfully implanted brain chips in multiple patients. One man used it to play chess just by thinking. Scientists at Harvard and MIT are working on age reversal technologies. Clinical trials are underway for drugs that could add decades to human life. The CEO of OpenAI said recently that we might achieve human-level AI within a few years, and after that, merging human intelligence with machines is the next logical step. Whether you believe that or not, it's hard to ignore that we're moving in that direction faster than anyone predicted.
No matter what your religion is or what you think, they are following the scenario in the book of Revelations to a T, right down to the last little bit. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, if we don't wake up, and through the power of those, see, not one drop of blood ever has to be spilled, and no one has to ever put any chains on their legs or their arms, ever. If people just wake up and exercise what was given to us in our Constitution, the power of the vote, while we still have that power.
So you say there is still a possibility for like one individual watching this tape to actually make a difference?
You better believe it.
How would that be so?
Well, number one, learn what the truth really is. Get away from the fantasy that you've been living. Educate other people, those you know, your family. Once that begins to happen, it spreads. And then if the people decide that they don't want what they have in store for us planned, just through the power of the vote, they can make this country and the world whatever they want it to be. Whatever they want it to be. And there are no limits on that, except to understand that you can never make everything all right, and you can never make everything all bad. Both must exist, and we must maintain a balance.
If you stayed until now, you're probably one of those who's awake. Or at least, you're willing to be. And that comes with a responsibility. Be responsible with your mind. Use critical thinking. Bill said it himself. Don't believe him. Don't believe us. Believe what you can prove, what you can verify. But you have to do the work. You have to research. You have to stay awake. Because if you stay awake, others around you might wake up too. And that's how things change. Now, Bill has a final message for us. So, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear.
By abdicating responsibility, by not walking in that divine state of grace, makes possible anyone meeting behind closed doors to bring about the world that they want. And the world that they want may not be the world that you want, or that I want, or that these people watching might want.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't participate, you can't complain. If you don't help cook the meal, you got no right to bitch about it. You got to sit down and eat what's put on your plate.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like that, then you should have been in the kitchen helping to prepare the meal, helping to plan it, helping to prepare it, helping to serve it. If you want to sit on your butt in the living room while somebody else prepares the meal for you and decides what it's going to be and puts it on the table, it's too late to say that's not what you wanted to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It's too late to say it's not cooked the way you wanted it to cook.
Well, that's very simple to understand. And
that's right. You got to eat it because you have to eat to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that anybody can understand the meaning behind that little story.
If this was predicted 27 years ago, somebody knew something.
Buckle up, because what you're about to hear is scary. Back in 1997, a group of futurists funded by a Washington, D.C. think tank and several three-letter government agencies wrote a book about what the world might look like in the future. And when you look at what they predicted back then, it's disturbingly accurate.
Now, this is the title of the book, 2025. Scenarios of U.S. and global society reshaped, there's that re again, by science and technology. You know what's so fascinating about this? It was published 27 years ago in the year 1997, and it was funded, well funded, by a Washington, D.C. think tank and three-letter government agencies But here's the thing. 1997, 27 years ago, and they write a book about a 502-page book about what the world's going to be.
A 500-page book filled with dozens of predictions. And according to some estimates, nearly 90% of them seem to match what eventually happened. And the ones that haven't happened yet may be closer than we think. Because the remaining predictions go into things like World War III, mass starvation, global crisis, and much more. But instead of me going through the list, let's hear this gentleman explain it himself. Because this is actually how I first became aware of it while watching one of his videos.
Okay, you ready for the list? Fast mutating viral disease pandemics, genetically developed vaccines, smart IDs, 1997, and this is, you can do the word search and research yourself. They predicted, not 2025, but by 2020, that people would be working from home virtually. Come on. Listen, that's World War III, of course. Nuclear devices causing widespread contamination. Nanotech devices. This stuff was never even heard of. Digital currency. Vaccination programs run by organizations like the World Health Organization for a global killer that has yet to emerge. First printing, February 1997.
The book is real. You can find it, you can read it, and these are not some far-fetched interpretations. Now, I would like to believe they're not right about everything, but we'll see. What we're going to focus on instead are the most important predictions that haven't happened yet, because we already know what took place. What's far more interesting is what this book says might still be coming. So let's start.
I want to now share with you some of the insights that these guys had way back in the mid-90s. Again, this is a well-connected think tank in D.C. They are funded and engaged with the wealthy corporations, the ruling class, the National Security Agency. And in 1997, they published this book, creatively titled 2025. And check this out. In the acknowledgments we read, our first thank you is to the sponsors, the people, and the organizations who made possible the original Project 2025 from which this book was created. What did they call it? It was called Project 2025? This book was published in 1997.
The project itself was led by futurist James Canton, an advisor in technology, national security, and economic forecasting. But what really raises eyebrows is the acknowledgments section in the book, because the authors openly thank the organizations that helped fund the original research behind it. Large corporations, technology companies, defense contractors, policy institutions. The kind of organizations that don't just observe trends, but often influence the direction of technology and policy. So the question becomes, were these simply educated guesses? Or were they looking at plans already being discussed behind closed doors? Either way, let's take a look at what they predicted.
10 things to expect if this Project 2025 from the mid-90s turns out to be correct about the remaining items that have not yet transpired. And before I list them, I want to remind us, these are not just, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I mean, it's like 90% track record here. But, and they may not be right about all these either, but here we go.
Now brace yourselves, because if what you're about to hear ever becomes reality, things could get very ugly. Let's hope they got this part wrong, but listen to this.
They said we will have World War III, a nuclear device causing widespread contamination, additional epidemics, cyber attacks, or in their world, computer-based socially significant crime, such as tampering with air traffic control or national security systems, a global currency, mass starvation. Now that, in and of itself, that's pretty heavy that we just considered, but given, again, the track record, and how the things that they're announcing here you also hear announced by the likes of Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and Jesuit Tide. We're going to see some pretty interesting stuff as we go forward, but we're just on Project 2025 from the 90s right now. Let's look first at the mass starvation. I was mentioning Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, WEF. He stated, we're going to have an angrier world. In the context of food and energy scarcity, we are going to have an angrier world. Those are his words. And so when he talks about an angrier world, and in the same interview, Klaus says that this angrier world will be because of economic conditions, and that's why I see the need for a great reset. In fact, roll that clip right now, please.
We have to prepare for a more angry world, and I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
When you start looking around today, some of these ideas don't feel as far away as they once did. Conversations about global crisis, food shortages, cyber warfare, they're no longer just theory. The World Economic Forum often discusses scenarios involving systemic shocks, digital infrastructure attacks, and the need for a reset of the global system. You hear similar language from government reports, economic forums, and international policy meetings. The idea that a large cyber attack could disrupt entire countries, or that supply chains could collapse and trigger food shortages, is something even officials now discuss publicly. And when you see these same themes appearing again and again, it makes you wonder, were these futurists simply connecting the dots ahead of time? Or were they closer to the people drawing the map in the first place?
There is a Obama-produced film, a movie, that came out called Leave the World Behind. Why did the Obamas get behind this film? The film, I won't be able to tell you that, but I can tell you what the film is about. It's about an apocalyptic scenario after the grid fails and there's a grid down crisis because of cyber attacks. And this comes out, again, right before 2025. And then you go back to 2014 with the release of a video game, which also has scripts like movies do. And this Black Ops 2, major prominent video game, the script writers for it were consulting with that the Wall Street Journal calls the premier futurist in the national security space. So the top Pentagon futurist was consulted for the script on this video game. And what is the script for the video game? Well, the object of the game is to prevent a cyber attack in the context of a new Cold War with China. And guess what year this video game is set? And again, this came out in 2014, and the video game is set in 2025. So we're starting to see kind of a pattern here, are we not?
But isn't it a little strange, that film produced by the Obamas? I mean, why that topic? And why now? And why do we keep hearing about these kinds of scenarios more and more often? Every now and then, authorities even suggest that people keep some emergency cash at home, enough for about 72 hours, just in case ATMs or payment systems suddenly stop working. So you start to wonder, what's really going on here? Maybe it's all just coincidence. I don't know.
We look at World War III, and we look at their predictions that a nuclear device causing widespread contamination will take place. This might sound outlandish, but keep in mind that since 1945, with the invention using of the first atomic bomb, there have been, in Cold War history, 16 near-miss nuclear events. And historians and national security experts estimate that about 1%, you have about a 1% chance in any given year of having a nuclear exchange. A 1% chance, then over a 100-year period of time, you'd expect it once. If you get halfway through that, you feel like, we're living on borrowed time. Well, we're like 80% of the way through a 100-year period of time since 1945. So it's hard to expect the unexpected. It's hard to foresee that which our normalcy bias doesn't allow us to see as potentials. We lose imagination because we see only the thing immediately in front of us. But this is something that the Project 2025 futurists are saying to expect. And again, we see war, epidemics, starvation. Let's do it in the proper order from the Bible again. War, starvation, epidemics. Those are 3 of the 6 that are up there from that pale horse.
God forbid something like that ever happens. I really hope they got this one wrong. But sometimes it almost feels like the scriptures are right on point. Now, here are the last 4 predictions we're supposed to expect. Listen to this.
Now, the last 4 predictions that they make here, we got 10 things to expect if they're correct. Universal monitoring of business transactions. Smart ID cards. Now, watch this. This gets even more interesting. smart ID cards, including your religious and or organizational affiliations and perhaps with your genomic data. I had to take a picture of that segment out of the book, put it on the screen so you can read it for yourself. Identification cards will be universal. Smart cards will contain information such as nationality, medical history, perhaps even key data from one's genome, education and employment records, financial accounts, social security, credit status, and even religious and organizational affiliations.
Now that might sound a little far-fetched, but remember, this book was written almost 30 years ago, and many of its predictions have already happened. So before we dismiss the rest, listen to this.
The ninth one kind of sounds innocuous and not that big of a deal. It's just Social Security will be based on need only. The technical term for that is means testing for transfer payments or other forms of welfare. Means testing meaning only those who need it will get it, and they're making a prediction that will be the case with Social Security. Some people might be a little have their feathers ruffled by that notion, but I'm not meaning to get into the economic political debates about that. I want to bring this out because if they will means test it, then they will also be willing to take the next step, and that is ideological testing. Happened with the truckers in Canada. Bank accounts frozen, the targeted group. Anybody who is the other, who is the demonized group of the day, can have now the precedent has been set in the West to be debanked, to have payment processors taken, to be prohibited from platforms that are kind of in that woke ideology at the moment. And so the fact that they're saying, well, you're not going to get your check unless you need it, that can step right next to the next stop on that journey toward tyranny. You're not going to get your food. You're not going to be provided for in a context of scarcity and famine.
Now, I don't even know which one is scarier, because honestly, all of them are terrifying. But it does seem to be getting clearer, doesn't it? They wrote about things like this almost 30 years ago, and today we keep seeing the same themes everywhere, in movies and video games. Some people call it predictive programming, the idea that certain scenarios are introduced in culture first so that when they eventually happen, we're not that surprised. Now, I'm not making any claims here, but you do start noticing similar conversations popping up everywhere. Technologists talking about the future, even people like Elon Musk discussing ideas like universal basic income. Some billionaires quietly building underground bunkers, and more of these signals appearing at the same time. So, what's really going on? What are they preparing for? What do they know that we don't? Anyway, let's keep going, because what comes next is very interesting.
This kind of leads right into another one while we're on number 9 about the Deagle Corporation. This was a major intelligence outfit that they were cited by and utilized by Stratfor, which is probably the biggest global intelligence corporation there is, and Stratfor cites Deagle. So they're a major player in intelligence developing and publishing. And they made a prediction that by 2025 there would be a reduction, look in the red, of population in America from 327 million to 100 million. And GDP would drop from 60,000 per person to 24,000 per person. Now, this is not to say that this will happen, but that's quite an alarming prediction to make. Why would you go out and say that? Well, it's in the context of here, what we were talking about, a mass starvation and global currency and major war and epidemics and cyber attacks. This is where you see massive population reductions and economic collapse. But I love their little disclaimer here. They first, this isn't the disclaimer, that'll be on the next slide, but first they say this: the collapse of the Western financial system will wipe out the standard of living of its population while ending Ponzi schemes such as the stock exchange and the pension funds. Take into account that the forecast that they've made here is nothing more than a model, whether flawed or correct. Okay, here's their disclaimer. It's not God's word. This is not God's word. This is not a magical device that allows us to see the future. Now, if you're planning the future and announcing what you're going to do ahead of time, then that's not a prediction. But these guys are just making predictions, and they're saying, you know what, this is flawed. This could not transpire as badly as we're seeing it, which makes me feel happy about that situation, about a population reduction of that magnitude and economic collapse. But whether it's going to happen or not isn't even so much the question as when.
These three organizations themselves are bounded by something called the occult. The occult is just basically hidden, secret knowledge, not available to people.
Professor Zhang.
Professor Zhang.
Professor Yang.
Professor Jiang has been showing up in feeds everywhere lately, not because he's chasing fame, but because people listen to what he says, and then they watch the world prove him right. Before the last election, he called it. Before J.D. Vance was on anyone's radar, Jiang named him as VP. Before the war with Iran escalated, he laid out exactly why it would happen, and when. So when someone with that kind of track record starts talking about hidden systems and secret knowledge, you pay attention. I spent time going through his work, pulled out the theories that explain the world we're actually living in, the questions we all feel but don't know how to ask. Who's really in control? And why does it feel like we're just watching it all happen? This might not be comfortable, but if you've ever felt like something's off, like the story doesn't match what you're seeing, this video is for you. So settle in, because Jiang is about to show you what's really going on behind the curtain. And by the end, you won't look at the world the same way again.
The first thing you need to understand, which is very hard, is that our world is a hallucination. It's a collective fantasy.
A hallucination. Not sometimes misleading or a bit subjective. A full-blown, shared hallucination. And he's not being poetic, he's being literal. He takes us straight to Plato's cave. You know the story. People chained, staring at a wall their whole lives, watching shadows, thinking those shadows are the whole universe. They give the shadows names, they build a language around them, they tell stories, wars are fought over which shadow is real, generations pass, and never once do they turn around. Jiang says, that's us. That's now. The economy, the borders, the stock market, the news, the rules-based order. All shadows, all projected by something we can't see. Here's the part that hits different. He says we're not forced to stay in the cave. The chains aren't even real. They're ribbons. Anyone could walk out. But nobody does, because we love the cave. We're emotionally welded to it. And if someone comes back from the outside and says, hey, those shadows aren't real, we don't think them, we kill them. I had to stop for a second when I heard that, because it's not just a story about ancient Greece. It's happening right now, every time someone questions the narrative. Think about that the next time someone calls you crazy for questioning the script. He's setting the table here. And trust me, what's coming next will change how you see everything. But first, we have to accept one thing. The world you think you're living in, it's a projection, a game, and someone built it. So yeah, we're not prisoners. We're volunteers. The question is, what are you volunteering for?
It is our conscious attention that creates wealth in this world, and it's really money or capital that extracts and stores our consciousness and turns it into wealth.
This is the sentence that changes everything. Jiang isn't talking about economics. He's talking about alchemy. Think about what he laid out before this. The vase example. You focus, you pour your attention into making something beautiful, and that focus makes it valuable. That's the raw material, consciousness. Not labor hours, not resources, but attention, focus. The stuff you're using right now to watch this. Now follow the trail. You work, you create, you focus. At the end of the week, you get paid. What just happened? You traded your consciousness for pieces of paper or digital numbers. Those pieces of paper, money, are just frozen attention. They store your life energy until you spend it on someone else's frozen attention. Jiang says this is the hidden engine. The whole global economy is a machine designed to extract consciousness from the many and concentrate it into the hands of the few. The elite don't get rich because they're smarter or work harder. They get rich because they own the storage units. They control the mechanism that turns human awareness into wealth. Then he gives an example that changes how you see everything. He lists the old storage devices, pyramids, Homer's epics. Each one soaked up generations of human attention. Pyramids weren't just tombs, they were concentration camps for consciousness. Millions of Egyptians poured their focus into those stones, believing, building, obeying. The stories of Homer did the same for Greeks. Centuries of attention stored in poems. Now the storage device is the dollar. Every time you work, save, spend, trade, you're pouring your consciousness into the system, and the system stores it as digits in someone else's account. It's the most efficient extraction machine ever built. But Jiang drops one more line that changes the game.
There's actually a war going on for the soul of humanity, for the human consciousness between the US dollar, the old world order, and artificial intelligence, the new world.
The dollar needs human consciousness to function. It runs on your attention, your labor, your focus. AI doesn't. AI generates its own attention, its own focus, its own value. So the old storage device is fighting the new one, not over markets, not over resources, over the source code of reality. That's the real war. And it's just getting started.
They don't force us to do anything. There's not enough of them. Okay? The way they maintain power is through manipulation and trickery and deception.
Many people imagine the elite as some shadowy cabal with armies and mind control rays. They pull levers, we dance. Jiang says no, that's a Hollywood fantasy. The truth is more humiliating. They can't force us. There aren't enough of them. If everyone on Earth woke up tomorrow and decided the game was over, what would they do? Send their tiny army against 8 billion people? They'd last about an hour. So, how do they hold it together? Manipulation, trickery, deception. Go back to the cave. Watch what happens when that one guy finally stands up.
He or she starts messing around with the chains and realizes, these aren't chains. These are just like ropes. I can just get rid of them. And this chain around my neck, it's like a ribbon. I can snap it off. And he doesn't know why he does this, but he does this. He does do this. And when he does this, they don't even care. Like, whatever, man, do whatever you want.
They don't even stop him. They just watch him stumble toward the light like, whatever, man, do your thing. Why? Because they know something he doesn't. Even if he leaves, everyone else will stay. The system doesn't need guards. It needs believers.
You think they have magic, and you think that they're evil, but really, all their power rests on our belief in their power.
Read that again. All their power rests on our belief in their power. The president, the banker, the general, the billionaire, none of them have power you haven't given them. You believe the dollar is worth something, so it is. You believe the cop has authority, so he does. You believe the election matters, so it does. It's a collective hallucination held together by consensus. And here's the part that got me. We want to believe. Because if it's all fake, then what have we been doing with our lives? What were our parents doing? What were their parents doing? That realization is too heavy for most people to carry. So when that guy comes back from outside the cave and says, hey, those shadows aren't real, they don't thank him, they don't debate him, they don't even chain him up.
But we fall in love with it. We're so attached to it psychologically and emotionally that if anyone tells us it's fake, we kill them for it.
Not the elite, the other prisoners. Because he's threatening the one thing they can't live without, their fantasy. That's the mechanism. That's how manipulation works. You don't need armies when people will kill the truth tellers for you. So next time someone calls you crazy for questioning the story, remember Jiang. They're not defending the truth. They're defending their cave. And they'll kill you for it if you let them.
You think that you go to university to learn knowledge. No, you don't. You go to university to be brainwashed and to believe that this system is not just fear, but actually what really makes this system work is the rules-based national order.
You spent years in classrooms, took loans, wrote papers, chased grades, and Jiang says that was brainwashing. Not education, brainwashing. He's not talking about conspiracy theories where professors secretly indoctrinate students with leftist propaganda. That's too small. He's talking about something deeper. The real brainwashing is the assumption that the system is basically just. That if you work hard, play by the rules, climb the ladder, you'll get what you deserve. That the game is fair. That the winners earned it, and the losers didn't try hard enough. That's the core belief they install. Not through overt propaganda, but through the entire structure. The way classes are graded, the way success is defined, the way history is told, the way economics is taught as if it's physics, not a set of choices made by powerful people. Zhang adds 2 more layers.
CNN, BBC, New York Times. Each time you read an article, you think you're receiving news. You're not receiving news. You're being brainwashed into believing that this order is fair, just, and appropriate, okay? It's a deception. And the last, of course, is culture, which is Hollywood. And, television shows, sitcoms, okay? Things that you absorb every day.
Education, media, culture. 3 overlapping machines running 24/7, pumping out the same message. This is just how things are. The rich deserve their money. The poor deserve their poverty. The wars are for freedom. The sanctions are for peace. The dollar is strong because America is great. You never hear a competing story because there is no competing story. The machines are all owned by the same people. They don't need to coordinate. They just need to hire people who already believe the story and will tell it well. And here's the part that makes it work. Zhang says this creates a legal and moral framework so effective that the elite don't even need to enforce it.
If you break the rules, it's not that the elite will come after you. They don't have to come after you because everyone else will come after you.
That's the final stage of control. You don't need cops when the citizens are the cops. You don't need thought police when everyone polices everyone else's thoughts. If you question the fairness of the system, you're not just wrong, you're dangerous. You're attacking the fantasy everyone else is invested in, and they will turn on you faster than any authority figure would. So the next time you're in a conversation and somebody says, "But that's just the way the world works," remember Zhang. They're not being reasonable. They're being the prison guard, and they don't even know it. So after showing us the cave and how money extracts consciousness, Zhang does something else. He pulls the camera back.
Another way of understanding these people is to think of them as the game masters, okay? The ones above us who's constructed the game and controlling the rules of the game as we play it.
Game masters. That's what he calls them. Not presidents, not CEOs, not elected officials. The ones above all that. They built the board. They wrote the rule book. He traces the chain upward. At the very top, something called the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. The central bank of central banks. Above governments, above laws. Think about that for a second. Then below it, the World Bank and the IMF. Organizations that tell countries how to behave if they want to play. Then below them, the national central banks. The Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the People's Bank of China. This is the operating system. And what does this operating system produce? A game. A global game with one purpose. To use the US dollar as the main mechanism for extracting and storing wealth.
Okay, so resources are considered the cheapest. Even though in reality it should be the most expensive, right? Because resources are limited, they're finite. Above resources, of course, is manufacturing. And above manufacturing is knowledge economy. And then the highest is finance.
Now watch how he connects it. The game masters built a price hierarchy. Not based on real value, based on control. At the bottom, resources. Oil, gas, minerals, food. The stuff you actually need to survive. Priced cheapest. Above that, manufacturing. Turning resources into products. Above that, knowledge economy. Patents, software, media. And at the very top, finance. Moving numbers. Creating debt. Printing money. Then he drops the map.
So resource, of course, would be Russia. Russia, the Middle East, the GCC, okay? Saudi Arabia, these places, okay? So these places provide resources. Manufacturing then would be China, right? Knowledge would be Europe and the Five Eyes, okay? Basically the Anglosphere, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, and then finance, of course, the United States, okay?
This is the board. This is how the world is divided. Russia sits on resources and sells cheap. China manufactures and ships. Europe and its allies own the ideas. America sits at the top, collecting rent on everything. Jiang isn't saying this is fair or unfair. He's saying this is the structure. The game masters designed it this way. And if you're born in Russia, you play the resource game. Born in China, you play manufacturing. Born in America, you play finance. You don't choose. The game chooses you. But here's where it gets interesting. Two countries inside the system hate it. China and Russia are playing, but they're playing to change the rules. And two countries aren't even allowed on the board.
If the United States doesn't like you, what it can do is not allow you to play this game. And these countries, of course, would be North Korea and Iran, among other countries, okay?
Iran sits on resources. By the game master's design, they're supposed to be at the bottom, selling cheap, taking dollars, staying quiet. But they're not playing. They're outside the game entirely. And they're poking at the structure. This is the setup for every war, every sanctions package, every color revolution. Not ideology, not freedom, not democracy, just game masters protecting their board. The question is, what happens when the players stop following the rules?
First, of course, is intelligence. What is intelligence? Spies, okay? Their job is to infiltrate other nations' elites and co-opt them into the system. That's what their job is, okay? That's what intelligence does. Then you have crime. Crime just engages in the most profitable enterprises, which includes, of course, drugs, human trafficking, and something called money laundering, okay? And this is a way to incentivize the global elite to work together. Okay? So that's the first two. And then there's one more mechanism called science. Now you think that science is about pursuing the truth. No, it's not. Okay? Science is fundamentally about finding evidence to justify and protect the status quo.
Three systems, operating above nations, above any law you can vote for, above any government you can change. Intelligence. Their job is to infiltrate other nations' elites and co-opt them. You don't need to invade a country if you already own the people running it. You don't need to win an election if you control both candidates. Intelligence agencies become integration tools, merging global power across borders. Crime. This is where it gets uncomfortable. Jiang doesn't moralize. He just observes. Crime engages in the most profitable enterprises. But here's the move. He says this creates incentives. When elite money flows through the same channels, when deals cross the same borders, when secrets become shared liabilities, you're not enemies anymore. You're partners. Science. This one cuts deep if you've built your worldview on it. It's not about pursuing truth. It's about finding evidence to justify and protect the status quo. That's why certain questions never get funding. That's why certain answers never appear in journals. That's why materialism is the only allowed framework. It keeps the conversation inside the fence.
Science is fundamentally about finding evidence to justify and protect the status quo.
Think about what that means for every study you've ever trusted. Every expert who told you the system is fair. Every Science Says headline that shuts down debate. The machine doesn't produce knowledge. It produces permission. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Now here's where Jiang ties it together.
And these three organizations themselves are bounded by something called the occult. And we'll discuss this later on, okay? The occult. The occult is just basically hidden, secret knowledge, not available to people.
Hermetic philosophy, the Kabbalah, not religion you practice on Sundays. Operating systems for people who see themselves as above the game. This is the architecture. Intelligence co-ops, crime connects, science justifies, and underneath all of it, a shared worldview you're not invited to. Not a conspiracy, a structure. And like any structure, it has load-bearing walls. Jiang is about to show us where they crack. So after building the whole architecture, Jiang asks a question. If this is real, there have to be people moving through it. Operators, people with names.
If it is true that this system is the way it is, there should be individuals in place that operate the system, right? Well, I'll give you some names. I'll give you 2 names. Jeffrey Epstein and Jared Kushner.
Jeffrey Epstein. You know the public story. But look at who trained him. He started at Dalton, one of the most elite schools in America, where the most powerful families send their children. Then Bear Stearns, finance. Then Douglas Lee, arms trafficking. Iran-Contra, one of the biggest global arms dealers. Then Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, intelligence. That's not a random career path. Someone was teaching him how power works across all 3 systems: education, finance, crime, intelligence. Then look at the Epstein files. 3 million documents released by the Department of Justice. Not leaked, released. On the government website. And what do they show? Bill Gates, the wealthiest man in the world, begging Epstein for money. Elon Musk trying to arrange meetings. Larry Summers and Steven Pinker dining with him at Harvard. Prince Andrew emailing him classified government reports. Not because Epstein was charming, because Epstein represented something. He said it himself. I represent the Rothschild. Your money is fake. I represent real money, real power.
These families help the Rothschilds. Secret Society? Chabad Lubavitch. Alright. And you're like, this is all conspiracy. This can't be true. Well, it's all true.
And here's what this network does with all that access. In 2011, America bombs Libya. Gaddafi falls, the country collapses, and Epstein and his friends are already emailing each other, calculating how to profit. Frozen assets, reconstruction contracts, oil reserves. They're not watching the news, they're reading the balance sheet.
They look at geopolitics and they're like, how can we take advantage of geopolitical events to make the most money for ourselves?
The second name is Jared Kushner, son-in-law to our president. Real estate developer turned Middle East peace negotiator. There are photos of him with Putin, with Netanyahu, with the Omani foreign minister, and the question Zhang asks, what are they actually discussing? Not peace. After the war, Ukraine gets rebuilt. Who gets the contracts? After Gaza, someone builds the luxury villas. Who gets the land? Kushner isn't negotiating ceasefires, he's positioning. The FBI's own confidential source on Epstein wrote in their files that Kushner moved Russian investment money through family charities. That the real Russian collusion story wasn't about Trump, it was about Kushner's network. And that on the night Trump was elected, Ivanka and Jared Kushner were at the grave of Rabbi Sneerson, leader of the Shabbat Lubavitch movement, whose followers include Netanyahu and whose network connects across intelligence, finance, and religion. This is the network. These are the operators. They move between education, finance, intelligence, real estate, not as separate roles, but as one integrated machine. The files are public. The connections are documented. Epstein is dead. Kushner is still dealing. And the machine is still running. So here we are. We walk through the cave with Zhang. We saw the shadows on the wall, the game masters above us, the pyramid that sorts nations like products on a shelf. We followed the money, consciousness frozen, stored, extracted. We watched the operators move through education, finance, crime, intelligence. We read the files, we saw the names, traced the connections. It's a lot. It can feel heavy, like the game is rigged and you just now realize you've been playing your whole life without knowing the rules. But here's the thing Zhang planted underneath every word he said. The chains are ribbons. They only hold you if you believe they hold. The game only exists if you play. Where you put your attention is where you put your life. Zhang showed us that. The vase is valuable because someone focused on it. The pyramid exists because billions of people focus on the dollar, the news, the grades, the promotions, the status. The system runs on your attention. It always has. So what happens when you start paying attention to something else? What happens when you spend an afternoon watching clouds instead of scrolling? When you have a conversation where no one checks their phone? When you make something with your hands and don't photograph it? When you sit with someone who's hurting and just stay present? You're not overthrowing anything. You're just withdrawing your energy from the hallucination and investing in what's actually real. The people in front of you, the ground under your feet, the breath in your lungs, the mystery you'll never fully understand. Zhang showed us the architecture. He didn't show us how to escape because escape isn't the point. The point is to see clearly enough that you stop being a volunteer. To recognize that the game is optional. To understand that the cave exists, but so does the light outside it. And no one is stopping you from walking toward it except your own attachment to the shadows. So maybe the move isn't to fight the system. Maybe the move is to build something that the system can't touch. A life so full of real attention, real connection, real presence, that the hallucinations lose their grip. Not because you defeated them, but because you stopped feeding them. The war between the dollar and AI, the civil war among elites, the pyramid, the operators, the files, all of that will keep spinning. It always has. But you don't have to spin with it. You can just be here, now, breathing, alive in a world that is far stranger and more beautiful than any shadow on a wall. Zhang gave you the map. What you do with it is your choice. But know this, the door was never locked. It was never even a door. It was just a shift in attention. And that shift is always available. Right now. Quick reminder, if you'd like to check it out, go to incogni.com/advice and use the code ADVICE to get 60% off annual plans.